The maxim that continues to resonate with me, and I continue not to live up to it as much as I want to, is we overestimate what we can do in the short term, and we really underestimate what we can do in the long term. And this kind of goes back to starting as an engineer and then moving to product. It was really tough for me to create a vision of something that was huge. I really believe people underestimate what they're capable of over even 5 or 10 year timeline.
Ronnie, cheers.
Cheers.
Welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here.
Great to have you. Would love to start with you as a software engineer.
There was a really distinct memory I had my first week as a software engineer. I sat down at my desk, open floor, kind of seating with your team. To the right of me is this senior British engineer named Ben. And I was nervous. I didn't really get I've written some code, but I haven't written as much as some of the other kids coming into the role. And I think the first day, he's like, Ronnie, come sit next to me. It was a pair programming team. So pair programming means you can't hide behind anything.
Right.
You're right next, write the code, right? So we sit down, and not only that, he was like, let's write some tests for this service that we want to build.
Okay.
What is a test? What do you mean write tests? What is a mocked function? Like, I was in like a deep panic the first 2-3 weeks at Amazon.
Thrown into the fire.
Yeah, I was like, I'm going to get fired. I was like, I don't know how to write tests. He can obviously tell I don't know how to write tests. What is going to happen here? That was my first that was a really memorable and poignant experience. And he ended up being a phenomenal person to sit next to as like an early engineer, because you see how a really efficient, really clear senior engineer operates. And it's actually in many ways not that different from a great PM. Like you start with, before you write any code, you sit next to him, he sits next to you, and you ask, what are you building and why? And if you can't answer that, you don't write any code. And if you can't answer that, then you start to think about, okay, how do we break this down into a very small problem? And then, on that team was test-driven development. What is the first test that you write before you actually write the code? But he was always asking, what is the problem and why are we solving it?
Was there a product person in the mix at that point?
The answer is probably yes, somewhere, but that also means
you weren't exposed to it maybe yet.
Yeah, I don't think it was that team I was on did not have a strong presence of a product person.
I see.
And
right.
Yeah, that eventually is what drew me to PMing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So at what point then you ended up doing software engineering for a few years? And then where did you start to get exposure to what it was like on the product side as a software engineer though?
I never got exposure to it. And that is what drew me insane. I kept asking, I was looking at it, we did roadmap reviews as an engineering team, and it was the most, to this day, the most robust and powerful engineering team I've ever been on. We worked well together. We wrote extremely efficient code. It was testable. It was scalable, all the stuff. We had no PM. So I kept asking, this all looks great on the roadmap reviews. Why are we doing this over that? And what about that? And who's making these decisions? And that really started to drive me insane, because the engineering manager obviously didn't have a great answer to that, even though he was doing his best, and we ended up building things that were largely valuable. But I kept and I drew him insane. And to this day, we're still very good friends, but he was like, just stop asking me these questions.
So what was it like when you officially made the transition? What did you find to be the most jarring being actually in that role?
Making the transition was hard. I had to have someone take a pretty big bet on me. I didn't realize just how big of a bet it was. I was like, well, I've been engineer for 3-4 years. Product can't possibly be harder than engineering. Just let me do this. And I couldn't quite get a team to take me on. And looking back, I totally understand why you don't want a junior PM running your team that's never had any experience.
Right.
One of the data scientists that I was working with in tandem took a bet on me, brought me on as a PM, who's now like, he was my manager at the time, now like a really good friend of mine and just a brilliant data scientist. But that first year was so hard. It turns out that no one actually knows what to build. You know, you can't just ask a director or a VP like,
Right.
hey, I just can't figure out what should this product be. And they're going to look at you and be like, what do you, I don't know. That was hard.
It's kind of operating in a world where you now are the decision maker on what to do.
Yeah, in the end, like the ambiguity is massive. So that is the first, that's tricky.
So talk about that a little bit, because I feel like, I think some people from the outside looking in on big tech
Yeah.
may think that, hey, in big tech, your role is very siloed, like you know exactly what you need to do, and there maybe is less ambiguity than a role at a startup. But even at that scale, I imagine there was a ton of ambiguity. And so maybe talk through like, some more details of what that was.
Yeah. So the team I joined as the first PM was a smaller team, maybe like 5, 6 people. It was also a team that was kind of going through a lot of change. We were responsible for external data used within revenue operations at AWS.
Okay.
So how does the revenue operations org responsible for like helping the sales and marketing organization make decisions faster use external data to power those decisions? And that was the so like, okay, where do you start? Which vendor do you start with? What kind of data do you go after? Do you go after data about businesses or about people, contact data or like firmographic data? Let's say you decide on like business data. Do you take all of your Salesforce data and send it out to them and let them match it and then send it back to you with what they think the best is? Do you buy all of their data and then do you build your own matching? Do you let people within AWS make changes to your data because they think it's better? And maybe they do, maybe they're right. But all of a sudden, like the number of things that you can build explodes, even in a space so confined to like AWS RevOps external data.
Yeah. What was the kind of state of the product though?
Yeah.
Was there already some traction and you had to kind of figure out all of this out? Or like what kind of decisions were made and what were not made? That can probably speak to that ambiguity scale.
Yeah. So at the time, we were using a third-party service to basically match our internal data to external data. So we were using a vendor for the external data. We were using a different service to kind of do that matching between our internal and our external. We were only able to make sense of 45% of our internal data. Internal data is like everything we know about our existing customers, people that are like likely paying us money. And only half of that population we could find external data for using this existing process. And who knows if like that's even an accurate number for that organization. So that was the state of it. Super sparse. We really couldn't measure how accurate any of it was. And it was still like fairly expensive. So that was kind of the state.
So was your goal to basically drive that 45% up? What was the kind of broader goal for the team?
I think our initial goal was, yeah, how can we increase coverage? But then like thinking about, if you took a step back, like what should this product look like? Well, it probably shouldn't just be a single vendor. It should probably be multiple vendors. Like we're AWS, we should be taking in external data from literally like the best data sources in the world. We should be able to consolidate it into like a single source of truth. We should be doing that at scale. There are 400 million legal entities in the world today.
Yeah.
You need to do that at scale. You need to do that across different data sources. You need to find a way to measure the quality of all of that. And then you need to find a way to operationalize that. Like the business at the time didn't know about a lot of this data
Right.
or how to use it. So initially it was like, okay, let's figure out a way to increase this coverage. And then we think about like, okay, we're AWS. Why are we using a third-party service to do this matching? Well, we can probably build this matching. And why are we using a third-party service to consolidate? Or we can build this like kind of taking in multiple data sources and then bringing them into like a single source of truth for a single business entity. And we started to form the idea for what this data product would look like. But then, what even is a data product? It can mean so many different things. Is it a data set? Is it like multiple data sets? Is it, so that's kind of the evolution of how we were going.
And then as you started to figure that out, you're working with your engineering team. How did you kind of balance your previous engineering kind of experience and expertise with kind of holding yourself back a little bit and making sure that you were still being like a good PM? And kind of separately related to that, did you feel like you could build trust faster with your engineering team because you were previously an engineer, or not necessarily?
It could definitely build trust faster. My problem was actually because I came from engineering, I could not think big enough quickly enough. I was too stuck on what can possibly be built with a high enough likelihood in the short, like,
Yeah.
you really to do PM. And so like frequently we're into this problem where Ronnie like figured out the roadmap for the next 3 weeks, but we get there pretty quickly and all of a sudden you have to think about the next 3 weeks, I wasn't able to like zoom out, because when you zoom out and you think months or ahead, you have to kind of squint around. Well, how do you do this? Well, I don't know. You kind of have to like forget about exactly how you're going to do this, but directionally thinking about, what needs to be built for like the customer. And that was very hard for me because I was very stuck in the engineering mindset of these things can definitely be built. This is how we can build them. This is how long it'll take. This is how we can break them down to increase the quality of our execution. And for me, that was a hard muscle, and still is in some ways. There are certain people around me that are very good at it, and I just try and sit next to them and suck as much as I can out of how they're able to do that. I don't think I've really thought about it until right now, but now I only care about the
Yeah.
why. The how can mostly, if there's one of the big things you realize when you've done engineering is, unless you're building like super low latency systems for like trading firms, there are multiple ways to build the same thing. And the trade-offs between these waves are probably not huge. So really the question is like, are you solving the right problem? Can you articulate it to the people that are building it for you in a way that makes sense to them so that they end up building that thing? What are the right problems? And then can you sell the people around you to build them? I don't think that was not what I thought I would be spending time on as a PM going into it.
Where do you see it going for the next 5 to 10 years, especially with AI playing a role here?
I think there was like a big wave of thinking right around 2023 when like ChatGPT came out, where we were like, PMs are gonna be gone. Like, forget about them.
Right.
It's not gonna be a role. I think in the moment I was like, maybe they're right, but not much has really changed. Like, I think the big things that have changed are your pace of execution is much faster.
Okay.
I think you can write a lot more code more quickly. That also means that you should be really precise around the problems that you're solving, because your speed is not much faster. You have less time to evaluate, like, is this the right thing? I think because of that, you can afford to think bigger. And I think, like, broadly speaking, it's cheaper to solve the same problem than it was like 10 years ago. And it's definitely cheaper to solve it than 20 years ago. So that means that there are problems that historically were too expensive to solve in the world that now are not. And I don't know. I think, like, what I'm really excited about is we should be seeing like way more entrepreneurs popping up. It's cheaper to do it. It's more accessible than ever.
Right.
I think there are just as many problems as there have ever been. And because more and more industries, not all, and I don't even think the majority are digitized, they become problems that can be tractably solved with software. So I'm excited about that. But I think like fundamentally the PM role is what is it? It's figuring out like what problem to solve and
Yeah.
and why. I don't know how will that ever go away.
I agree.
Yeah.
I think the product role is here to stay, and in fact, will get even more challenging in the coming years, as I think PMs are probably going to be expected to do more. I think with
Yeah.
the fact that we need to keep up with the pace, right?
Yeah.
Now, that said, I think we'll probably need less PMs, and there won't be these kind of large teams of PMs owning kind of every sliver of the product journey. I think that you could kind of make an argument that PMs can go broader. I feel like even as you go really early stage, PMs are probably joining those startups later. PMs are probably overseeing multiple products from day one rather than getting in the way of product development and product velocity in the beginning. And so I'd be curious on how AI actually helps PMs be more productive more at the end of the day, because I think that's where it really goes.
Mm.
And this whole concept of an AI PM, I think, is more just like a buzzword.
Yeah.
Every PM
Yeah.
needs to be using AI. Like there's another guest that I brought on that we talked about this concept of an AI enabled PM.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably a good term where like every PM needs to have that in their toolkit. And so do you like, what are the tools that you are allowed to use internally at Amazon? And then like, how are those helping you be more productive as a result?
I do think that the role of PM has to evolve. So with the advent of AI, I mean, AI is just a tool. Like Figma is
It's
a
a
tool.
tool.
Figma enabled PM.
Exactly.
PMs needs to be Figma enabled, AI enabled,
Yep.
Microsoft Word enabled.
Tool enabled.
Yeah. As much as you can build a better product by being more specific to your engineers around what you're trying to build and why, that bar has raised. There's no reason why you can't build a small prototype of a UX very quickly to like very clearly indicate not even just to your team, but initially like to your customers, is this what you were thinking of? And then iterate on that before you give it to the engineers, which is a much more expensive resource.
Right.
Um,
Where do you think design plays a role then in that new world, if at all?
I don't have a good answer to that. I spend my world is data products.
Yeah.
You probably have a much better answer than that. I'm curious what your answer is actually.
I think the design role will also evolve even more than the PM role will, because PMs will be naturally doing more design work.
Mm,
I think ideally a really strong designer will be in the discovery phase, talking to customers with the PM
mm,
and just bringing more of a visual perspective to that. And then I think designers will, on the other side of the spectrum, hopefully be more involved in the day to day
mm,
with the engineers during execution. Whereas I feel like right now designers are probably kind of in the middle.
mm,
And I think designers should be expected to be able to do more, and hopefully they're more productive with their own AI enabled Figmas.
yeah.
And but I think the design role is not going to go away. It's still really important. Good UX is always going to be there. It's not like every PM now is suddenly going to have strong design taste. You could you could have that through like ChatGPT or Claude or any of these tools helping you with your design. But that's just prototyping, to your point. I think that's very different from production ready designs and user journeys.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think more software should be better designed. I think the world will be a better
Yeah,
place if
hopefully this
more.
raises the bar, I
Yeah,
think, for good software.
yeah,
And more products can kind of take the Airbnb route of being designed
right,
first.
right. Yeah, I mean, it's increasingly, I think we are going to be using software more and more in our lives. And just as we want like nicely designed chairs to sit in, we will pay more for software that just feels better. It's probably like an area that I want to become much better in is developing taste and design and kind of intuition around that. I think it's going to be super important. You're designing for someone. whether you're building a product for someone, you're also designing for someone. As much as you can be in that person's shoes, if you're not designing for yourself, as much as you can be in that person's shoes, empathize with them, the better you will build and design something for them.
In terms of the line between product and engineering now, where do you see that line changing? And what examples have you experienced so far of where that the line is blurring more and more?
On the software side, I still think the greatest engineers are like very product minded. They're always asking like, who is this for? Why are we building it? And I think that will continue to be the case. The more they can be close to the customer and who they're building it for, the better the product will be. I don't think that changes with AI or the next tool that we build. And on the product side, I think the product team can decrease the time it takes to get to the thing to build, the right thing to build, both by prototyping more quickly and then by communicating that prototype more precisely to the engineering team with the AI tools. So they can iterate faster with the customer. Like we talked about earlier with Figma and ChatGPT, you can prototype almost anything. And then you should be able to take that prototype and have it be pretty specific enough for the engineering team to implement. And obviously, we'll get to a world where some of these features the PM can execute on their own.
Do you feel like you still need to scratch that builder itch of your prior? You built at least 2 products before. I imagine
Yeah.
more are on the way. So how do you
Yeah.
feel like you can scratch that itch if you still have it?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have it. I also don't know how you can be a PM today and not have an intuition for what the tools can actually do. I like recently helped a friend build a small prototype for um, a tool for doctors that visit skilled nursing facilities.
Mhm.
I just like did it in my spare time, and it's just as a way to kind of learn what is Cursor, how good are these LLMs, right? Like, can you really just build anything with like a couple prompts? How hard is it? That was extremely informative because it calibrated what we can actually do in my mind and versus what we think we can do.
Yeah, how did you like, what was that learning that you discovered from that?
Yeah, I mean, I think building net new things is a bit faster for sure. I mean, I don't know, maybe like 20-30% faster to build a prototype. I think when it comes to understanding how to integrate with like different APIs, or like we like did integration with like a sandbox API of an EHR, which is like EHRs are notoriously unfriendly things to integrate with. They're not designed for your life to be easy.
Yeah.
Um, I don't think I could have done that integration in any reasonable amount of time without having Claude, Opus, and GPT-4 going ham for hours and
Okay.
like, no, no, no. But these tools are like many times like a hammer when you really need something much more delicate, especially as your code base grows. It goes rogue. It touches things that you don't really realize. If you don't have like a robust test suite, I don't see how you can like really deploy something into production with customers using it and feel like it's not going to break.
How do you think about what it takes to go from building a prototype with these AI tools to actually building something that's production ready? Because I think a lot of people think that, oh, I can suddenly build a website and build an app now. And like, yeah, you can get kind of the zero point 0.5 up, but how do you get from 0.5 to 1 that's like actually usable and scalable for others? And do you think that it requires still you to be somewhat technically savvy in order to actually get that done?
I think you definitely need to be technically savvy. I don't think you need to be like a senior engineer at AWS to do it production. I'm sure like my approach would be get it into production as soon as possible. And that kind of tells you all the things that you didn't think you knew you needed to do that you need to do to get that there. And then you need to have people start to use it. And then only there can you discover like where the gaps are. I don't know, between like Vercel and Supabase and Cursor and Replit, like it is pretty, it's actually kind of magical how you can get something working with
Yeah.
like a real endpoint and a domain.
I'm curious to get your take on this. I feel like if you're less technically savvy and you're using these tools agentically to build apps and websites, there is going to be more wasted and dead code throughout your code base because
Mm-hmm.
inevitably you're going to be touching files individually and you're going to need to know where to reduce all of that load. And then as a result, I would say it's probably more expensive for those users to use these LLMs because the input tokens are so high. Like, do you feel like that's the case, or do you feel like these LLMs are probably figured it out and they could probably help you clean it up?
I've seen some startups try and tackle this question of refactoring
Mm-hmm.
and cleaning up code base as it grows. I don't know how good they are. I think your code base is like, unless you have like 4 APIs, like your code base is going to grow to build any kind of meaningful product.
Yeah.
And if you don't have an understanding of how that code base operates, if you have a cursory understanding of things you've typed in as a prompt, I don't know, but I think it would be really hard to maintain anything in production. I think you need to bring in, you either need to learn it yourself or you need to bring in someone that has a deep understanding of the code base, uses the latest and greatest AI tools to iterate on it and build features on it. But each feature that they ship it does what you think it does, and it doesn't break other things that you think it doesn't. And that is very similar to how software happens today. I think it's a faster pace of iteration, but it's pretty brittle. I mean, it gets brittle fast. I don't know how the LLMs will solve that on their own.
Yeah, I think all of this has to be complementary. It can't be
Yeah.
a replacement.
Yeah.
And I think we're far, far away from the world where engineers are going to be replaced by AI. I think it's got to, again, it's just a tool at
No,
the end of the day.
there's so many more problems to solve that we have not solved.
Right.
And what is software if not like a way for a human being to have more leverage on the world?
Mm-hmm.
We're not even like, I don't know. It's very easy to lose sight of the fact that there's so much more to build and to grow and to provide value for people. This is only going to accelerate the volume of software built and the number of problems solved, the number of like value created. It will create a lot of waste for sure, but
I think it'll normalize over time. And that waste will kind of eventually die out and you'll still have
yeah,
winning products coming out the other side. And that's ultimately probably what we need as a society. Maybe a spicy question, but do you think that vibe coding or kind of prototyping should be part of the PM interview process moving forward? There are very few companies that are just starting to kind of scratch that.
yeah.
But I'm curious on your take on what do you think that's required?
That's a good question. I never thought about it. I don't think okay, if I flipped it and said, would I want to hire someone that's like never vibe coded before? I think the answer is like absolutely not. That kind of indicates like this person's not that interested in like how technology is changing,
Yeah.
how you can be moving quickly. Probably not like that technical. That seems like a scary person to hire. So from that sense, I think it should be part of the interview process. It's a good idea. I should keep that in mind.
Yeah. How do you think if it wasn't, you would assess a PM's curiosity to kind of be able to work with that AI? Would you ask them directly or would you kind of assess that in a different way? Because historically, the PM interview process and most of the bigger companies has always been centered around, can you answer a product sense question with the typical framework that every single company copies? Starting with the mission, going the goals, user needs, prioritizing a few different ideas.
Keep in mind, I've never actually interviewed for a product role.
That's fair.
So this might be my first.
Well, hopefully it'll be different by the time we interview.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a typical framework. It's almost like an SAT style now, where companies expect you to answer a product sense or strategy question in a particular way. I feel like in the new world of AI, it's less about how do you have the best ideas as a product person and how do you have like the fanciest strategy, and more about how can you crystallize that from the kind of like why to the how and be able to bridge that gap. And I think being able to test for that is going to become more and more important as the lines blur over time.
I still think the hardest part about product is knowing what to problem solve. But if you're hiring for a product person that you hope can execute on something and they're not using the best tools available to them, that might be a problem. It just becomes more expensive.
I wonder how companies view even candidates using AI as part of the interview process itself. A lot of companies have a case assignments that they give out, presentations that you have to give, even some of these live hypotheticals.
Yeah.
AI can be used for all of those. And so it'd be interesting. I almost see it as the person wants to use AI, they should use AI because they're going to use that in the job, right?
Yes, I agree. I also think you can tailor an interview where you can test and see what the AI would answer for it, and then find questions that are ambiguous enough where like the AI answer doesn't make sense. I've seen companies do that, and I think that's brilliant because I've seen a question where you can ask the AI the same question and it gives you different answers.
Yeah.
Because it's ambiguous and you have to like explain how you would think through it.
Yeah, more or less. I mean, at the end of the day, like generative AI is always going to generate something more or less different. I think the prompting then goes back to like the curiosity of problem solving and how you approach it from a prompting perspective. And I think that's probably the most important aspect.
How I'm talking someone through how they would like approach a problem and
Yeah.
break it down.
Because the way you prompt it is essentially your thought process on how you would ask the right questions.
Yeah.
Like, if you think back to, I don't know if you interviewed for consulting companies ever back in
No,
the day,
I avoided that like the
but
plague. Yeah.
the typical in the beginning, when they give you a case, you have to ask them all these clarifying questions.
Yeah.
And that was like the quintessential thing from the case in point interview book that everyone read.
Yeah.
And I think being able to ask the right questions is almost to get to the why is probably the most important skill
Yeah.
of being a PM now more than ever.
Interviewing PMs that have already worked somewhere, I find I've done that a number of times. That is where it becomes actually quite straightforward to discern like how this person thinks, because you get to what did you build? Okay, why did you build it there? Like, how do you know that was the right thing to build?
Yeah.
These aren't like ants. These aren't. There's no right answer here, but you can really quickly figure out, did this person like think through why they built something? Those I love those conversations because the people that did are like, "Ugh, it was really hard and like
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but I think this is the right thing and it was exciting and I still don't know if it was the right thing." Versus people that have kind of like blanket statements and you could tell they didn't really consider what else to do and to build. You can suss it out pretty easily.
I think at Amazon, we used to call it like peeling onion. Like, as part of the behavioral interview process, you kind of keep getting one layer deeper.
Yeah.
And I think naturally you uncover how involved that person actually was. And I think your point about like seeing their frustrations and emotions as part of it, once you get to that point of the onion, I think you've gotten into the core.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably what you want to, I feel like that's actually really hard to assess. And it's hard to get to because it, you have to create an environment where the candidate feels slightly comfortable enough to go that deep, and B, like also vulnerable enough and like to be able to speak to that, to how they actually feel, and not what they think the company wants to hear. And I think that's a trait of a better candidate than someone like you said who is just gonna have a polished answer.
High confidence, like this was
Yeah.
absolutely the right thing to build. Here's why. I'm like, pretty sure.
I think most people pretend like they know exactly what to do when they're on the job. And in PMing, it's more of an art than a science a lot of the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you see the future of distributed work now? Because I feel like more and more companies are pushing to go in office. Obviously, Amazon requires the 5 days a week.
Yeah.
Where do you see that going? Like, do you see that the direction is going to be that we're basically going to go back to what we used to be? And what do you think works well and not in that type of dynamic?
It's hard to imagine we're going to go back where everything is in person all the time.
Yeah.
I think some companies are making bets that they will be virtual and they will deliver things in a virtual way. Some companies have high conviction that that is not the way to do it. I think you're going to see many different versions of people trying different things. Maybe earlier on in like a product or a company, it's more important to be in person, kind of critical. It's also personal preference. And, when you have like kids versus not, I have a strong preference for being in person now. Maybe not like every day, but like 3 days.
Yeah, I agree. I think that in person just makes a huge difference to everything we just talked about. The I think actually it probably results, if you do it well, in less meetings needed outside of that because you're naturally getting a lot of that interaction in person and hopefully quicker decision making
Yeah.
as a result of that. And maybe like a lower barrier for people to reach out to you virtually because they feel like you guys are a little bit more connected.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I feel like right now, especially in a remote first company, except for the very few companies that really foster that remote culture, it feels like every conversation requires a meeting. And I feel like we need to kind of get back to figuring out how we really invest in the culture and the actual decision making and productivity of the company will frankly naturally flow as a result of that.
I agree with that. And I think the one of the biggest factors in the speed of execution of a company is like how well that company trusts each other.
Yeah.
And I think it's much easier to build trust in person. Not everyone can build trust with someone virtually.
Yeah.
Just as like human beings, some people can do it really easily and some people can't. So if you're trying to build a high trust organization where people don't need to consistently like double check or doubt like what the other person's doing, you need to be in person.
Yeah. That's why we do this podcast in person.
Yeah.
Hopefully that builds more trust in our.
I thought you just wanted to hang out with me for a bit.
I like that too. That too.
Okay.
If you could go back and give your younger self,
Yeah.
some piece of advice, what would you give? Whether your younger engineering self or your younger product self.
The maxim that like continues to resonate with me and I continue not to like live up to it as much as I want to is we overestimate what we can do in the short term and we really underestimate what we can do in the long term. I mean, what that means to me is like think bigger, believe that you can do the thing that you think is too big. And this kind of goes back to starting as an engineer and then moving to product. It was really tough for me to create a vision of something that was like huge. At the time I was like, I'm just going to be like this like one data vendor, external data product. Like it's going to be really neat and clean. And everyone around me was like, yeah, but like, what else could we do? I'm like, well, how do we even do this? But just that muscle, like I don't think most people think big enough. I know that's it's a very Amazonian thing to say, but like I really believe people don't. They really underestimate what they are capable of over even like a 5 or 10 year timeline. And every capacity, working out, like sleep, work, relationships, like the compounding that happens when you think about and do something for a long period of time is the most amazing thing. So I would tell my younger self, think bigger, whatever that means at the time. I'm sure my younger self would be like, I am thinking big, go away.
Yeah. We'll leave it at that.
All right.
Thank you, Ronnie.
Thank you, Zach.
See you soon.